The helicopter came in low over Chicago, its rotors chopping the frozen air into a heavy pulsing sound that rattled windows for blocks. Snow blew sideways along the street below a white curtain caught in the wash of the blades. Searchlights cut across rooftops and brick slid over the glass facade of Lakeview Memorial Hospital, then moved on. For a brief second, the lights hit the big red emergency sign, making it flare against the storm. Inside the ER, the ceiling tiles trembled. A row of fluorescent lights flickered, buzzing louder as the vibration rolled through the building. Someone at the nurse's station glanced up. Probably a training run, he muttered more to the coffee in his hand than to anyone in particular. The rotor noise faded into the distance. The lights steadied. The ER went back to the sounds it knew best, the soft beeping of monitors, the distant squeak of wheels on tile, the quiet breaths and restless moans of people waiting. 12 hours earlier, the sky had been clearer. The cold had been just as sharp. Lena Hart pushed a stainless steel cart through the automatic doors at the staff entrance, her breath making quick white puffs in the dark. On top of the cart sat a dented metal tin, polished clean, its lid tied with a piece of red string. The string was the only bright color on her. Her coat was too thin for a Chicago December, a faded navy thing that had lost its shape years ago. The cuffs were frayed, the zipper stuck halfway up. She kept one gloved hand on the cart handle and the other jammed deep in her pocket for warmth. In the locker room, the warm air hit her face and fogged her glasses. Voices floated in from the hallway, fast and high, and already a little tired. Christmas Eve or not, the hospital never stopped. Lena shrugged out of her coat, hung it on the same hook as always, and slid the tin of cookies onto the cart again. Without the coat, her scrubs showed how slight she was, how the fabric hung on her shoulders. She pushed through the swinging door into the main ER. The nurse's station sat like an island in the middle of the floor, computers glowing charts stacked in leaning piles. 3 nurses had claimed the corner closest to the coffee machine. Their scrubs were new and colorful, patterned with tiny cartoon wreaths and snowflakes. The sleeves of their jackets were pushed up just enough to show smartwatches and bracelets. Nina Clark sat at the center of them, one leg tucked under her on the chair phone. In one hand, a cup from an expensive coffee chain, in the other. Her hair was pulled into a ponytail so smooth, it looked sprayed in place. She looked up as Lena approached. "Oh my God, is that the tin again?" Nina said. Her voice held the bright tone people used when they were pretending to be friendly and did not quite manage it. "Please tell me these are not last year's famous dollar store oatmeal cookies." The other 2 nurses leaned in, smiling. "They're fresh," Lena said. Her voice was quiet but steady. "Baked them this morning." "You baked," Nina repeated, as if tasting the word. "That is adorable. Who has the time?" One of the others snorted into her latte lid. "Apparently people who do not have Christmas plans." Nina smothered a laugh and reached out anyway. She lifted the lid before Lena could breathe in the faint smell of cinnamon and oats. "They look dry," she announced. Lena slid the tin a little closer to the center of the station. "If you do not like them, you do not have to eat them." "But then I would be rude," Nina said. She took a cookie between 2 fingers, inspected it, and bit off an exaggeratedly small piece. She chewed slowly. The other 2 watched her face. "Well," one of them asked. Nina swallowed, lifted one eyebrow, and said, "Tastes like integrity." She smiled very wide. "And probably generic flour." The others laughed. The sound bounced against the tile and metal. Lena's mouth twitched as if it might form a smile, and then did not. She looked down instead. "They are warm," she said. "That is something." She turned before anyone could answer, taking the cart with her. The cookies on top rattled softly in their tin. The ER was already filling. A small boy with an inhaler clutched to his chest leaned against his mother's coat. An older man in a Cubs jacket snored lightly in a wheelchair, a hospital blanket tucked around his legs. A teenage girl with glitter still stuck near her eyes held a towel to her forehead, fingers bright with chipped polish. Lena moved among them with practiced ease. She knelt beside the boy and asked about his favorite Christmas movie while she listened to his lungs. She adjusted the man's blanket so it covered his ankles. She offered the girl a cool cloth that did not smell like antiseptic and showed her how to press it lightly over the cut so the skin would not bruise around it. Her hands were quick, but never rushed. At the far end of the room, someone called her name. "Lena, can you grab that IV for me?" She set down a chart, checked a wristband, threaded a line, taped it down with clean, even strips. Her movements had a steady rhythm, like someone who had done this in far worse places. Back at the nurse's station, Nina was scrolling through her phone, swiping absent-mindedly the cookie half-finished in her hand. "Look at Aspen," she said to the others, turning the screen. "Look at that cabin. Tell me this is not where I should be right now." "You are on nights until New Year's, remember," one of them said. "You blew all your PTO on that Vegas trip." "Right," Nina sighed. "And Lena gets the holiday pay. Our resident martyr." She raised her voice just a little. "You really like this place that much, Lena?" Lena glanced up from the cart where she was sorting supplies. I like people being alive, she said. Nina lifted her cup. To life, then. The coffee smelled sweet and strong. Lena could not remember the last time she had bought anything that cost more than a few dollars and came in a cup that nice. Her own coffee cooled in a plain mug on a lower shelf, darker and thinner, brewed hours ago. A monitor somewhere beeped a warning and the moment broke. Nina swung back to her screen. The others scattered to rooms and carts and medication drawers. Lena took the cookies and began to make her rounds. She set the tin down on a side table in the break room for the night shift to pick at later. She tucked one into a napkin and slid it into a patient's hand when he admitted he had not eaten since morning. She left a few in the tiny staff lounge for the techs who would come in after midnight. By the time her watch showed that the official start of night shift had arrived, the tin was lighter and the hospital felt a little less harsh. Not softer exactly, just less sharp around the edges. Outside, the first flakes of the evening storm began to fall, dusting the sidewalk and the ambulance bay in patches of white. Inside, the lights hummed and the air smelled of disinfectant coffee and faintly of cinnamon. By late afternoon, the ER had settled into that uneasy rhythm that came when the waiting room was full, but nothing was technically on fire. The storm outside had thickened. Snow pressed against the glass like a living thing, clinging to the edges of the windows, piling on the lip of the ambulance bay. Every time the automatic doors opened, a knife of cold air slid along the floor and up into the soles of shoes. Lena hardly noticed the draft anymore. She was in trauma too with a teenage boy who had tried to open a can with a steak knife. Blood striped his palm bright against the pale, shaky skin. You are lucky, she said, cleaning the cut. You missed every tendon. Feels like I cut them all, he muttered through clenched teeth. She wrapped the gauze layer over the layer fingers, moving with steady pressure. His mother hovered in the corner, twisting a scarf in her hands. It will sting tonight, Lena said, but you will still be able to text. You will survive. The boy snorted just enough to loosen his shoulders. His mother let out a breath she had been holding. When they were discharged, the boy walked out with his hand bandaged his mother with 3 printouts and a promise to keep knives away from him when he was bored. Lena stripped off her gloves, washed her hands until the smell of blood and antiseptic faded, then glanced at the clock above the station. Her break technically had been 20 minutes ago. No one had reminded her. In the tiny staff lounge, someone had left the television on a low volume. A sitcom laugh track bled into the hallway. The room smelled of reheated food and coffee that had been forgotten on the warmer. She pulled her lunch bag from the communal fridge and sat at the small table near the vending machine. The sandwich inside was plain peanut butter on whole wheat wrapped in wax paper. She took a bite, chased it with a sip of cold coffee from her mug, and felt the food sit heavy but functional in her stomach. Through the half-open door, she could hear voices at the nurses' station. Flights out of O'Hare are already getting delayed, one of the younger nurses said. If this storm lasts, nobody is going anywhere. Nina laughed softly. I am not supposed to be here at all. Aspen, remember fires, hot tubs, actual snow you choose to be in. Could be worse, the other woman said. You could be like Lena and honestly not have anywhere else to be. The laugh that followed was shorter this time, a little thin around the edges. Lena slid her phone from her pocket and set it on the table screen down. For a moment, she stared at the back of the case at the web of cracks running across one corner. Her thumb traced the rough edge, then she flipped it over and woke the screen. A list of notifications blinked up at her. 2 from the hospital scheduling app, 1 from a generic pharmacy advertisement, 1 from an unknown number with a preview that read, simply, Reminder. She ignored them all and opened her banking app instead. The balance stared back at her in unforgiving numbers. It was not nothing. It was never nothing. But it was small enough that any surprise could knock it flat. She tapped into the transactions and scrolled past the deposits from the hospital. Every 2 weeks, the same number. Under that, outgoing lines in pale gray text repeating with ritual precision. Rent, utilities, phone, a few grocery store names. And more than once, the same facility in a suburb outside the city, Lakeview Care and Rehab Center. She opened the most recent one. The amount made her swallow. It was more than most people would have considered reasonable. Enough to cover private room and board in a place that did the bare minimum and still charged like it was doing more. She checked the date, checked the next due date, did the math in her head. Rent would be tight next month. If she cut coffee entirely and stretched groceries a little thinner, it would work, as long as nothing broke. The vending machine hummed beside her. Somewhere down the hall, a monitor alarm chirped and then stopped when someone silenced it. She locked her phone and turned it between her hands, then unlocked it again and scrolled to a different contact. There were not many, a handful of coworkers, an old number from Montana that no longer worked, one labeled simply, Eddie Collins. Her thumb hovered for a second, then she tapped call. The line rang longer than was comfortable. She pictured the phone bolted to a wall at the far end of a dim hallway, flashing light no one noticed. At last a voice picked up, a woman-tired professional. Lakeview Karen Rehab, this is Carla. Hi, Lena said. This is Lena Hart. I'm calling about Mr. Collins, Eddie Collins, room 214. There was a short pause as keys clicked. One moment, ma'am. Muted static filled Lena's ear. She stared at the bland, beige wall in front of her, at the faint dent where a chair had hit it too hard. Carla came back on the line, voice slightly softened. He ate about half his dinner, she said. We had to coax him. He was asking if he had to go back out. Kept saying it was too cold in the streets. Lena let her eyes close. You told him he is not going back out, she said. We did. He forgets, but we tell him. Did he sleep last night? On and off, night terrors again. He woke the roommate. We adjusted his meds. Lena's jaw tightened for a heartbeat and then relaxed. Is there a charge I missed? She asked. Any extra expense this month? No, everything is current. We were going to call you after the holiday about the rate going up next quarter, but that is not for a while yet. All right, Lena said. Thank you. Can you tell him I said hi? That he is safe. Please use that word. Safe. Sure thing. And if he asks about the streets, you tell him I checked. They are too crowded. No room. Carla made a small sound that might have been a laugh or a sigh. I will tell him, she said. Merry Christmas, Miss Hart. Thank you, Lena answered. The words felt thin in her throat. You too. She ended the call and held the phone in both hands, resting her elbows on the table. For a moment, the room felt very quiet. Even the television seemed to have gone still. In her mind, Eddie was not in a small institutional room with beige walls and a narrow bed. He was on the sidewalk where she had found him the first time, curled into himself under a snow-dusted army surplus coat, lips blue, fingers stiff. He had tried to stand when she knelt beside him, mumbling about needing to get back to the convoy, about bridges and routes and sectors that no longer existed. She had taken one look at his feet, at the gray skin and the sores along his ankles, and called an ambulance. He had fought her all the way into it, weeping and cursing in the same breath. By the time the paperwork was done that night, the snow on his coat had melted and soaked into the gurney sheet. She had signed her name on several lines, and in doing so tied her bank account to his chart. A burst of laughter from the hallway snapped her back. Nina's voice again pitched in that bright way she used when she was trying to keep herself entertained. Lena slid her phone away, wrapped the rest of her sandwich, and stood. She tossed her paper napkin in the trash and washed her hands in the tiny sink, watching the water run over her knuckles. The skin there was rougher than it had been 5 years ago. More cracks, more small scars. When she stepped out of the lounge, Nina turned in her chair. There she is, Nina said. We were taking bets on whether you fell asleep in there. Lena blinked. I had calls to make. Family, one of the other nurses asked, curiosity pricking at the edges of the word. Lena thought of Eddie staring at the ceiling, not always sure what year it was. Something like that, she said. Nina rolled her eyes and went back to the computer. Out in the waiting area, the television had switched from daytime reruns to local news. Footage of snow-clogged streets filled the screen. A lower third banner scrolled updates about canceled flights and closed roads. Another line of text, smaller, mentioned military convoys moving through certain parts of the city for a joint training operation. A few patients watched with mild interest. One older man shook his head. Never seen so many uniforms in this town on Christmas, he muttered. Lena paused near the doorway, the glow from the screen highlighting the angles of her face. For a second, the camera cut to a brief shot of a line of trucks on the highway, green paint under a dusting of snow. Headlights glared through the flurries. She felt something in her chest give a small, involuntary jump. Then someone at the triage desk called her name, and she turned away from the television, away from the moving line of trucks, and walked back into the bright, humming light of the ER. By early evening, the ER had filled to the edges. Every chair in the waiting area was taken. The hallway gurneys had blurred into a line of blankets and bandages and restless feet. A light over one of the trauma bays blinked yellow. Someone had taped a paper snowflake to the glass, its folded points already curling from the humidity. Between calls and charts, Lena slipped back into the locker room. The space was narrow, and bright rows of metal doors facing each other, paint chipped at the corners. A flyer about the hospital holiday party hung askew on the bulletin board, a cartoon Santa in scrubs, smiling over a tray of cookies that looked suspiciously perfect. She spun the dial on her locker and pulled the door open. Her coat hung where she had left it, sagging from the hook. Below it, a spare pair of worn sneakers sat side by side, laces tucked inside. On the top shelf, a small battered tin rested beside her folded change of clothes. This tin was not the cookie tin. It was smaller, older, the paint on its lid rubbed away by years of hands. She reached for it without looking, fingers finding the familiar dents. For a moment, she just held it, feeling the weight. The room was empty. The only sound was the faint hiss of the ventilation. She set the tin in her palm and lifted the lid. Inside was a strip of folded cotton, once white, now yellowed. Wrapped in the cloth, a half of a laminated card lay face down. She unfolded the cloth with care as if it were something fragile that might break from being remembered. The card caught the light. On one side, there was a photo the plastic scratched, but still clear enough to show a younger version of her staring back. Hair shorter, eyes harder, jaw set tight. Beneath the photo, a name and a line of numbers. Above it, bold letters. Maddie Echo 7. The other half of the card was missing, cut clean the top edge, perfectly straight. Years ago, someone had taken scissors to it, as if they could sever a life with the same ease. Her thumb brushed the edge. The plastic was smooth and cold. The locker room door creaked. Lena snapped the lid shut and slid the tin back onto the shelf in one quick motion. The cloth went with it, tucked in like a piece of gauze. By the time the door opened fully, her hands were empty. Nina stepped in, unwrapping a piece of gum. She stopped when she saw Lena. "Oh, there you are," Nina said. "We were wondering if you had tunneled out." Lena closed her locker with a light clang. "Just changing my sleeves," she said, tugging at the cuff of her scrub top, as if that had been the plan all along. Nina leaned against the lockers, eyeing her. "You really keep everything in there, do you not?" she said. "Feels like you live here." Lena offered a small shrug. "Sometimes it feels that way." Nina popped the gum into her mouth and chewed. "You hear about the accident on Lakeshore coming in on," she asked. "They are bringing him to you. Trauma 3, car versus guardrail. Sounds messy." "All right," Lena said. She moved past Nina and out into the hallway, the faint scent of spearmint trailing behind her. In the main ER, a flurry of motion gathered near the ambulance bay. The doors slid open and gusted cold air and a blast of siren noise into the room. 2 paramedics pushed a stretcher, fast plastic wrapping, crinkling around a dark shape. "Mid-30s male rollover on Lakeshore," one of them called. "Seatbelt failure, hypotensive and tachy. We have not found the source." Blood streaked the sheet pooled along one side. The patient groaned low and thick as they swung the stretcher into Trauma 3. Dr. Reyes appeared at the foot of the bed, snapping on gloves. "What do we have?" he said, eyes already scanning the monitors. "BP was 90/60 en route, now dropping," the paramedic said. "We packed what we could. No obvious external bleed except scalp." The overhead lights were harsh, flattening the man's skin into paper white. His hair was matted with blood sticky and dark clinging to the pillow. Lena moved to the opposite side, taking the man's wrist with practiced fingers, feeling for the thready pulse. "Get me a pressure now," Reyes said. "Pupils check his pupils." A nurse lifted a lid, shined a penlight. Reactive, both. Blood seemed to be everywhere and nowhere. The sheets were soaked, but when they lifted them, there was no large open wound, no gaping hole to match the numbers on the monitor. Reyes frowned, the lines around his mouth deepening. "Where is he losing it?" he snapped. "I need a source." The room buzzed with movement. Hands pressed along ribs, an abdomen checked, dressings lifted limbs. The man's breathing hitched and shuddered. For a second, the noise receded for Lena. The beeping monitors and voices went thin around the edges. Her focus narrowed to the man's face, to the way his jaw twitched on one side, to the slow seep of red along his hairline. "Turn his head," she said. No one moved. They were busy with lines and needles and numbers. She said it again louder. "Turn his head." Reyes looked up, eyes sharp. "We do not have time to baby his neck." "He has a collar," she said. "We can tilt, just a little." There was something in her tone that made him hesitate. Then he jerked his chin. "Fine, on 3, 1, 2, 3. They tilted the man's head just enough to shift the mat of hair. Underneath, near the base of the skull, where it met the neck, a small wound revealed itself. It was no bigger than a thumbprint, but it pulsed dark and hidden against the curve of bone. "There," Lena said. She pressed 2 fingers over the spot, firm and exact. Warmth flooded her glove. She adjusted the angle, feeling the vibration of the man's heartbeat under her touch. The flow eased, then slowed. The monitor responded with a tiny lag. The blood pressure numbers steadied a fraction. The waveform regained a bit of shape. "Get me pressure dressing here now," Reyes ordered. Hands appeared with gauze and tape. Lena kept her fingers in place until she felt the bandage snug against the wound, felt the pressure maintained. Only then did she move back. The patient's breathing evened out, still ragged, but less frantic. Color crept back into his lips, turning them from gray toward something that might pass for pink. The room exhaled. "Nice catch," one of the paramedics said under his breath. Reyes took a breath that was almost a laugh. "I told you to check the head," he said to no one in particular. "Occipital bleeds hide. You have to look for them." He peeled off his gloves with a snap and dropped them into the bin. His shoulders relaxed a notch, confidence sliding back into place. He stepped out into the hallway, already rehearsing the version of the story he would tell at the station. Lena stayed a moment longer, watching the rise and fall of the man's chest. Then she turned to the side tray where someone had left a roll of tape and a pair of scissors. She tidied the scattered wrappers, wiped a smear of blood from the rail with a clean towel. Her movements were small, almost invisible. At the doorway, a younger nurse paused. "Did you see that?" she whispered to another. "Reyes just dove in on that head wound. That is why he isn't attending." The other shrugged. "That is why he makes the big bucks," she said. They moved on the story, forming between them in real time, already bending. Lena peeled off her gloves and tossed them away. She rubbed the bridge of her nose with the back of her wrist, felt a faint ache behind her eyes, then pushed it aside. In the staff bathroom, she caught her reflection in the mirror. The harsh lighting picked out the lines at the corners of her eyes, the slope of fatigue along her cheeks. She drew her hair up to retie it. For a second, the neckline of her scrub top shifted, and the scar at the base of her skull appeared in the glass. It was not pretty, a jagged line 6 centimeters long, the skin puckered and pale. The kind of mark that did not come from a kitchen accident or a childhood fall. Her fingers brushed it lightly. The skin there felt different from the rest of her neck, less alive. The memory that went with it was a set of sensations more than images. Heat pressing from all sides, the smell of dust and fuel, the sound of metal tearing, the instant of weightlessness before impact, then pain bright and cold at the back of her head and the world tilting sideways. The bathroom light flickered, snapping her back. She dropped her hair, letting it fall to cover the scar, and turned off the faucet. The roar of the hand dryer next to her masked the noise of the ER for a brief second, then cut off and released it again. When she stepped out, the station was buzzing. "Did you hear?" someone was saying. "More convoys on the Kennedy. My cousin is stuck in traffic behind a line of Humvees." "National Guard," another voice guessed. The television in the waiting room showed the same footage as before, but now the anchor spoke with a different tone, less casual. There was talk of increased joint training of specialized units moving through for reasons no one quite explained. Nina watched the screen, arms folded. "If they are smart, they will not stop here," she said. "We have enough to deal with." Lena picked up a chart from the rack, the folder edges soft from use. Her eyes flicked just for a heartbeat to the image of the convoy on the screen. Vehicles in a snowstorm, headlights in a white blur. She turned away, chart in hand, and walked toward the next room, the rhythms of the ER rising to meet her. By the time the sky went fully dark, the storm had settled in like it meant to stay. Snow hurled itself against the hospital windows in relentless sheets. The orange glow of the streetlights outside turned the flurries into swirls of copper and white. In the ambulance bay, the plowed piles along the curb rose higher, with each pass hard ridges where tires had packed the snow into ice. Inside, the overhead speakers chimed. "Attention, staff," a calm administrative voice said. "Due to worsening weather conditions, non-essential personnel may be released early at the discretion of their department heads. Please coordinate with your supervisors. Drive safely." The voice clicked off. The sound of the ER rushed back in to fill the space. At the nurses' station, heads popped up from behind monitors. Someone let out a low whistle. "That is new," one tech said. "They never let people go early." "Guess they do not want to dig us out of a snowbank later," the charge nurse replied. Nina swiveled in her chair, already reaching for the schedule board that hung on the wall behind the station. Names and shifts were written in different colors, a patchwork of handwriting. "So," she said, tapping the board with the back of her pen, "who gets to flee, who has to be a hero?" Lena was finishing a set of notes pen, scratching quietly on paper. She glanced up, then down at the stack of charts in front of her. The charge nurse, a solid woman named Marlene, came over with a clipboard. "All right," Marlene said. "Here's the deal. We keep a skeleton crew in ER, 2 nurses, 1 tech, Reyes, and whoever else gets stuck with us. The rest can go if they can get out." Nina raised her hand like a student. "I vote to not die on the Kennedy," she said. "I live 40 minutes away on a good day. In this, it will be an hour and a half." Another nurse chimed in. "My sitter is already texting me. If I'm late, she walks. My kids cannot watch themselves." Marlene nodded. "You two go. Pack up, clock out in the next half hour before the roads get worse. I need 1 more to stay, and that is it." There was a brief silence as everyone looked at the board, then at one another. Lena capped her pen. "I will stay," she said. It was not dramatic. She said it in the same tone she used when asking for a fresh set of gloves. Simple and sure. Marlene looked relieved. "You sure, Hart?" Lena nodded. "I can walk home if the buses stop. It is not far." Nina huffed a laugh. "Of course," she said. "Of course you will stay." One of the other nurses shot her a look. "What?" Nina said. "She likes it here?" "It is fine," Lena said. "You have farther to go." Marlene clicked her pen against the clipboard. "All right then," she said. "Hart, you are with me and Reyes. Everyone else discharge what you can, and do not start anything you cannot finish before you leave. Anyone already admitted upstairs is their problem now." Staff began moving with a different energy. There was a shuffling of belongings, a flurry of logins and logouts. Coats appeared from lockers. Heavy boots were pulled on under scrub pants. The buzz at the station took on the nervous edge of people watching the clock. As the first wave of nurses headed toward the exit, the outside doors slid open and let in a knife of air. A swirl of snow followed them and skittering along the floor before melting into small wet spots on the tile. "Text us if the roof caves in," one nurse called back over her shoulder. "Bring us a snowman," another added. Marlene waved them off. "Just do not get stuck in a ditch," she said. Nina lingered a little longer at the station, shutting down her computer in careful steps. She slid her phone into her scrub pocket, then turned to Lena. "You really are okay staying?" she asked. Lena glanced at her. "Yes," she said. Nina shrugged into her parka, a sleek black thing with a fur-lined hood. She zipped it up, the zipper teeth glinting under the fluorescent lights. "You know," Nina said, voice half thoughtful, half teasing, "most people have somewhere they want to be on Christmas Eve." Lena adjusted the badge clip to her scrub top. "I am where I need to be," she said. Nina gave a small crooked smile. It was not quite kind, not quite unkind. "Cheaper than heating your apartment, I guess," she said, and then seemed to regret it a second later. "Anyway, try not to let Reyes drive you crazy." She joined the others heading for the doors. In a minute, she was gone, swallowed by the glass and snow and night. The ER felt larger, without the full staff. The noise level dropped, but the tension in the air did not. Machines still beeped, phones still rang, patients still shifted and coughed and worried. The difference was in the gaps, the empty chairs, at the station, the unused computers. Marlene did a quick lap of the floor, checking room numbers and staffing, then came back to Lena. "Once the last of these discharges are out, we will probably see a lull," she said. "That is when the crazy people decide to drive, so do not get comfortable." "I will restock while it is quiet," Lena said. Marlene nodded. "Good plan." An hour later, the waiting room had thinned. Many of the minor cases had been sent home, with instructions and prescriptions. The patients who remained were the ones who could not leave. Chest pains, broken hips, a child with pneumonia sleeping under a tent of warm, humidified air. The snow outside had piled up against the base of the glass doors, a solid bank almost halfway to the handle. Each time the doors tried to open, they jerked a little, fighting the weight. The television in the corner played local news on low volume, footage of the storm, aerial views of highways where strings of headlights crawled through white. The anchor's voice was smooth, professional, framed by a graphic that read, "Winter Blast." At the bottom of the screen, a ticker crawled past with other headlines. Military vehicles moved through the metro area as part of joint training. The words slid by, disappeared, then began again. A younger male nurse, one of the few who had stayed, glanced up. "They are really rolling out the toys tonight," he said. "Maybe they are worried Chicago will riot if Santa skips us." Marlene snorted. "As long as they do not park in my ambulance bay." "They said special convoys," the nurse went on. "You think it is like a high-value target thing, top secret stuff." He grinned at Lena. "Relax," he said. "They are probably chasing some runaway criminal. Definitely nothing to do with us." Lena was wrapping a fresh bandage around an elderly woman's hand, covering a skin tear that had bled more than it should have. The old woman's skin was paper-thin, spotted with age. Lena kept her attention on the task. "Keep it dry," she told the woman. "If the edges lift, come back, we will fix it." "Bless you, dear," the woman said, patting Lena's wrist with surprising strength. "You are all angels in here." Lena smiled once, small and contained. When she finished, she pushed an empty supply cart toward the back hall. The hallway lights buzzed overhead. The further she went from the main ER, the quieter it grew. The hum of activity dropped away behind her, like sound behind a closed door. The supply room sat at the end of the corridor, a heavy door propped open with a wedge. Inside, shelves rose to the ceiling, stacked with boxes of gloves, gauze tubing, and neatly labeled bottles. The air smelled faintly of cardboard and alcohol wipes. She restocked the cart with methodical movements. Gloves, saline flushes, alcohol pads, IV lines. Her hands moved on their own, picking what would be needed, filling spaces without thinking. As she turned to leave, a draft of cold air brushed along the hallway. She glanced toward the far end where the double doors that led to the main lobby stood. They opened with a soft, hydraulic hiss. A man stepped through. He wore a dark wool coat over jeans and boots, nothing that screamed official. Yet the way he moved gave him away. His posture was too straight, his steps too deliberate. His hair was cut close on the sides, neat, even after being under a hat. His hands were bare, despite the cold fingers relaxed but ready. He paused just inside, letting his eyes adjust to the light. His gaze swept the hall in a quick, practiced scan, taking in exits, cameras, people. Lena felt the air in her chest catch halfway. She pulled the cart closer to the wall and stood behind it for a second, as if reading the labels on the saline bags. The man walked toward the ER, his footsteps soft on the tile. As he approached the nurse's station, he slowed his eyes, lingering on faces, badges, the layout of the room. He stopped for a fraction when his gaze brushed over Lena. It was a tiny hesitation, almost nothing, but she felt it. She dropped her eyes to the cart. turned her head just enough that her profile showed instead of her full face. The man looked at her a second longer, a faint tightening at the corners of his mouth, then moved on. He came to a stop in front of the security desk at the main entrance to the ER. The guard on duty was a big man with a shaved head and a winter scarf still looped around his neck. "Help you?" the guard asked, barely looking up from the tablet in his hand. The newcomer reached into his coat and pulled out a slim wallet. He flipped it open, just enough to flash a badge and an ID card, then closed it again. "Colonel Ezra Kane," he said. "I'm looking for a staff member. I was told she might work here." The guard's attention sharpened a little, but not much. "We get a lot of staff," he said. "Who are you looking for?" Kane slid a laminated photo from the wallet and set it on the counter between them. The picture showed Lena younger in desert camouflage helmet tucked under one arm. Her face in the photo was unsmiling eyes narrowed against bright light. "I need to know if this woman is or was employed here," Kane said. His voice stayed low, controlled. "It is important." The guard picked up the photo and snorted. "Looks like half the women that come through here," he said. "Tired and overworked." He handed it back. Kane did not raise his voice, but something in his shoulders tightened. "She would be a nurse," he said. "Probably keeps to herself. She might go by a different name now." The guard shrugged. "Look, man," he said. "I deal with drunks and angry uncles and kids who think they are tougher than they are. Nurses and scrubs, patients and gowns. They all blur together. You want HRU come back during business hours?" "Business hours will be too late," Kane said. The guard gave him a flat look. "Then that is your problem," he said. "Not mine." For a moment, Kane just stood there, the photo between his fingers. The air around him felt charged, as if he was holding back motion. Across the room, Lena guided the supply cart behind a tall cabinet, putting another barrier between herself and his line of sight. She kept her pace normal, not hurried. Only her eyes watching, from the reflection in the glass of a wall clock, betrayed her attention. Kane exhaled once through his nose, a small contained sound. "Thank you for your time," he said. He slipped the photo back into his wallet, the movement precise as if he had done it 1,000 times. As he turned to leave, his gaze swept the room one more time. It brushed over monitors, over the empty chairs where nurses had sat earlier over Lena's back as she moved toward the far hall. She did not look up. The doors opened for him with a low sigh and admitted a rush of cold air and a scatter of snow onto the floor. Then they closed, and he was gone, swallowed by the glow of the lobby and the storm beyond. For a moment, the ER held its breath. Then the phones rang, a monitor alarm chirped, and sound flooded back in. Marlene called out for someone to take a new patient. The younger nurse near the television made another joke about convoys and criminals. Lena straightened, a stack of gowns on her cart. Her face was still, her movements careful. She pushed the cart back into the main ER, the wheels whispering over the tile, and stepped into the light. Time slipped into the deeper hours of the night. The waiting room lights had been dimmed one notch enough to soften the edges of faces. Children slept against parents' shoulders. A man in a winter coat dozed with his chin on his chest, hands still in gloves. The storm outside did not care what time it was. Snow kept falling thick and steady, piling up against the glass. The world beyond the doors had become a blur of white and orange. In exam room 6, a young man in a Marine Corps t-shirt sat on the edge of the bed, one boot off his ankle, wrapped in an elastic bandage. His uniform pants were tucked neatly, the camouflage creased even after a day of wear. The hospital gown they had tried to give him lay folded on the chair in the corner, untouched. PFC Tyler Brooks tested the laces on his remaining boot, tugging each one with sharp, practiced motions. A dog tag clinked softly against his chest with every move. Reyes had already cleared him. "Sprain," the doctor had said. "Stay off it for a couple of days, ice if you can, do not be a hero." Tyler had nodded, biting back a smile at the last part. You did not tell someone that if you thought they already were one. Now he waited for the discharge papers so he could sign them and limp his way out of there. Lena stepped in with a clipboard. "Private Brooks," she said. "They are just printing your instructions. I will have you sign, and then you are free." "Yes, ma'am," he said automatically, then corrected himself. "Sorry. Yes, ma'am, nurse. Sorry. Habit." "It is fine," she said. She walked to the small printer on the counter and checked the output tray. The machine hummed to life, slow and stubborn. Her steps were quiet. The room smelled of antiseptic and the faint leather of his boots. Tyler watched her as she waited for the papers. He had seen a lot of nurses in a lot of emergency rooms, both here and on bases. Something about her did not quite fit the usual pattern. It was in the way she moved, he decided, the way she checked the floor before she stepped, as if there might be something sharp there. The way her eyes flicked to the door, the corners, the exits, not nervous, just aware. The printer decided to jam, emitting a grinding sound and a flashing red light. Lena sighed under her breath and opened the panel, pulling the wrinkled paper free with careful fingers. "Of course," Tyler said. "It would do that." "Old machine," she said. It does not like the night shift? She bent to toss the crumpled sheet into the trash. As she did, the small battered tin in her scrub pocket slipped out, hit the side of the trash can, and bounced to the floor with a sharp metallic clatter. It spun once on its edge before landing near Tyler's boot. Lena froze for a fraction, then straightened too fast, bumping her hip on the counter. The sound was small but sharp in the quiet room. "Sorry," she said, already reaching down. Tyler was faster. He leaned over, ignoring the protest in his ankle, and scooped up the tin. The metal was cold and smooth edges dented in places where it had taken hits. "Here," he said. "You dropped your cookies kit or something." The lid had popped open when it hit. The piece of folded cotton inside had shifted. As he tilted the tin toward her, the cloth slipped back just enough to reveal the corner of plastic. His eyes caught the color and shape before his brain had time to decide not to look. It was laminated and thick. The edge was cut straight, not torn. A government ID card by the feel and look of it, not a regular one. The formatting on the visible corner was unmistakable. The pale strip, the blocky font, the faint watermark that showed only at certain angles. He had seen one like it once in a briefing he had not been supposed to attend for a program he was not supposed to talk about. A black site operation with a code name that had been carefully vague. His hand tightened on the tin. Lena reached out, fingers extended, palm open. "I have it," she said. Her voice had dropped half an octave, smoothing into something flatter. Tyler did not move right away. His gaze flicked from the card to her face. The cloth slipped back another fraction, showing more of the ID, enough to read the bold line across the top. Med Echo 7. He felt his mouth go dry. He had heard that name in half-whispered stories in dusty tents from men who had been too tired to filter what they said. A medevac gone bad. A mission that did not exist. An entire team written off in a single line and then scrubbed from the report. He had heard the rest too. That there had been rumors of one survivor. That the survivor had vanished into some bureaucratic void, declared dead on paper and gone in every other way. He had never expected to see the program header again. Not printed on any physical object. Not here in a city ER in the pocket of a nurse who baked her own cookies. "This card," he said slowly. "Where did you get this?" Lena's eyes met his. The quiet in them had changed. No longer soft, no longer simply tired. There was a different kind of stillness there now, like water that had frozen clear over something jagged. She closed her hand over the tin, not roughly, but with complete intent. "You did not see it," she said. Her voice was no louder than before, but every syllable was precise. Tyler swallowed. "That is a special ID format," he said. "Black site personnel. Medics in particular. They stopped issuing those years ago." "You are mistaken," she said. "I know what I saw," he answered. The air in the small room felt tighter. Lena stepped in closer, keeping her body between him and the doorway. She did not crowd him, but she narrowed the space enough that his focus had nowhere else to go. "Private Brooks," she said quietly. "I'm going to be very clear with you. You did not see this. You did not see me." There was something in the way she said his rank that made the hairs on his arms rise. Not emphasis, not threat. Recognition. As if she knew exactly what level of obedience had been beaten into his bones. It tripped the old training in his mind before he could help it. He nodded once. "Understood," he said. Some of the tension bled from her shoulders, but not all. She slid the tin back into her pocket, making sure it was deep and secure this time. The scrub fabric smoothed over it, hiding the outline. "You can sign your papers at the station," she said. Her tone was back to normal nurse rhythms. "They will give you a copy of your discharge instructions." He watched her for another breath, as if testing whether the previous moments had been a hallucination. Her face was blank in a way that did not feel empty. It felt constructed. "Sergeant told us once that Med Echo 7 was wiped from the record. He said more to see how she would react than because he expected an answer. That everybody died." Her eyes flickered. It could have been the light. "Then that is the story you have," she said. "Stick to it." She opened the door. The hallway noise rushed back in. Monitor beeps, footsteps, distant snippets of conversation. Tyler shifted off the bed, testing his weight on the bandaged ankle. Pain flared, but manageable. He followed her out. They reached the station where the printer finally spat out a set of papers. Lena handed him a pen. "Sign here," she said. "And here." He signed his name, looping a little more messily than usual. His hand did not feel quite as steady. Dr. Reyes appeared on the other side of the counter, flipping through a chart. "Marine good to go?" Reyes asked. "Yes," Lena said. Tyler glanced at him. "Doc," he said. "Your nurse here, she ever mention where she worked before this place?" Reyes barely looked up. "Does it matter?" he replied. "She works here now." "It might matter," Tyler said. Reyes gave him a quick, amused look. "You fall on your head too?" he asked. "You are cleared. Go home, try not to re-enlist with your ankle." Tyler considered pushing, then saw the wall in the doctor's expression. Not hostility exactly. Dismissal. The kind that told him he would get nowhere. In the chairs nearby, two nurses, one of them Nina, were restocking the crash cart. They were not trying very hard to hide that they were listening. I am just saying, Tyler went on. I have met combat medics, the real deep field ones. They carry themselves different. She does. Nina exchanged a look with her colleague. In the field, she said slowly, biting off each word. You think she was in the field? Tyler nodded. Pretty sure that badge in her pocket is from a program that does not officially exist, he said. He lowered his voice, but not enough. Nina sat back on her heels, then laughed. It was a bright sound, but something brittle ran under it. You have got to be kidding me, she said. Her, secret operator. Come on. The other nurse giggled, covering her mouth. She can barely afford decent sneakers, Nina went on. You really think the government would let their elite medics walk around with holes in their shoes? Tyler frowned. That is not really how that works, he said. Oh, I'm sure you are an expert, Nina replied. You twisted your ankle and watched some YouTube conspiracy videos. Marlene, passing by with the chart, shot her a warning glance. Nina, she said, that is enough. Nina lifted her hands, palms out. Hey, I am just saying, she said. If she was so important, somebody would have found her already. Lena had moved away during the exchange content to let their voices roll past her. She checked an IV pump, straightened a blanket, cleared a tray. From the corner of her eye, she could see Tyler still watching her with that searching look. She did not meet his gaze. Thank you for the help, ma'am, he said finally. She looked up at that. Take care of your ankle, she said. Yes, ma'am, he answered. He limped toward the exit discharge papers in one hand, plastic bag of meds in the other. At the door, he glanced back once more. Lena was already moving into the next room, her back to him. When his silhouette disappeared into the swirling snow outside the ER, felt a shade quieter. Later in the thin space between one call light and the next, Lena found a minute alone in the tiny staff lounge. The television was off now. The room hummed with the sound of the soda machine compressor. She sank into the plastic chair by the table, the kind of chair that never quite fit any back. Her bones felt heavier than they should have. She took her phone out again, thumb hovering over the screen for a moment before she unlocked it. She did not open the banking app this time. She scrolled past messages and contacts, past the ordinary digital clutter of a life, and tapped on a photo instead. It was not a picture so much as a capture, a screenshot of a text message from a number that no longer existed in her contacts. Med Echo 7 mission failed. Seraph 3 sole survivor. The date and timestamp underneath glowed in small gray letters. December 24th, 5 years earlier. The words had burned themselves into her the first time she saw them. Not the mission failed part. Missions failed all the time in ways the public never saw. Not even the designation of survivor. It was the soul. She traced the word on the glass with the pad of her thumb. Outside the lounge window, snow slid along the brick, thick and heavy. Somewhere above that, beyond the roof, the night sky glowed faintly from the city lights below, hiding the stars. From far off faint, through layers of concrete and weather, she heard it. The distant chop of rotors. It was too far to shake the lights, too muted to rattle the glass. Just a low, rhythmic pulse almost lost under the hum of the building. Her hand stilled on the phone. The sound went on for a few heartbeats, then faded into the storm. She locked the screen, set the phone face down on the table, and sat very still until her breathing matched the quiet of the room. Then she stood, rolled her shoulders once, and walked back out into the ER. Sometime after midnight, the hospital felt like it had slipped out of the world. The city was still out there, but it might as well have been on the far side of a snowfield. The windows were opaque with frost. The snow at the base of the glass doors had risen almost to Lena's knees. The plows outside had given up on finesse, and were now just pushing white from one side of the street to the other. Inside the ER ran on fluorescent light and habit. Lena was mopping a small slick near the nurse's station, the bucket sloshing gently at her side. Someone had tracked in melted snow, then stepped in it with bloody shoes. The streak of diluted red had bothered her until she went and found the mop. She liked things clean. Not spotless, that was impossible here, but ordered. Marlene was at the station reading a chart, glasses low on her nose. Reyes was somewhere in the back, dictating notes. The younger male nurse, Jake, was half watching the monitors and half watching the news on the muted television. On the screen, a map of the city glowed, dotted with icons for closures and delays. In a small window in the corner, live footage showed a line of headlights moving slowly along an elevated highway, snow curling around them. The building shuddered. It was not a subtle tremor. It passed through the floor and up into Lena's shoes, into the water in the mop bucket, sending ripples across the surface. A second later, the sound arrived. The chop of rotors no longer distant, heavy and close right above them. It came through the concrete in a deep pounding thrum. The light fixtures shook. Dust sifted down from somewhere inside the ceiling. Jake jerked upright. What the hell, he said. Marlene's head snapped up. The monitors on the wall flickered for half a second, then steadied. The overhead speakers crackled. A panicked voice cut through from the front desk. "Security to the roof access," the voice said. "We have a helicopter attempting to land on the pad. Repeat, we have a bird on the pad." Lena's hands tightened on the mop handle. The last time she had felt this particular combination of vibration and sound, she had been somewhere very far from Chicago. The memory rose unbidden, a flicker of searchlights, on sand, the smell of jet fuel, the sting of grit in her eyes. Marlene jabbed a finger toward the ceiling. "They said training," Jake said too loudly. "Maybe this is all just training." "Training does not land on my roof at 1 a.m. in a blizzard," Marlene said. The rotors shifted pitch. The thudding slowed, settled. The building hummed under the weight of the machine, touching down somewhere above the inpatient floors. In the waiting room, people twisted in their seats, craning their necks like they could see through the ceiling. A child started to cry. His mother hushed him, eyes wide, toward the windows. On the far side of the ER, the security guard from the front desk barreled through the double doors, breath puffing in front of his face. His scarf had come loose and hung over one shoulder. His radio hissed on his hip. "They just told me there's a military chopper on the pad," he said, not quite believing the words, even as he said them. "Big one. This whole place is shaking." Jake let out a low whistle. "You think they brought Santa?" he said, the joke landing flat in the charged air. Nina's chair was empty. She had left hours ago with the others. For a moment, Lena was grateful for that. Marlene rubbed the bridge of her nose. "Call upstairs," she said to the guard. "Find out what is going on. If this is a mass casualty, I need to know how many." Before he could respond, new lights flashed across the frosted glass of the front doors. Blue and red, white and amber, cutting through the orange haze of the street lamps. Engines growled outside, deep and low, different from the ambulances Lena knew by sound. Tires crunched over the packed snow. The beam of a headlight swung across the lobby, dazzling for a second, then moved on. The automatic doors at the main entrance strained against the weight of the snow banked against them, then shoved it back in a heavy grinding motion. A wedge of freezing air rushed in, carrying the smell of exhaust and cold metal. Black vehicles pulled up to the curb in a staggered line. They were not marked, but their shapes were wrong for anything but government work, heavy and squared off, built to carry weight and armor. The lobby filled with bodies. Not visitors, not patients. Men and women in dark uniforms, body armor layered under thick jackets, helmets, clipped to their belts instead of on their heads. Their weapons were held low, but ready barrels angled toward the floor, hands near triggers. Their boots left dark, melting prints on the tile. The civilians in the lobby froze. A woman in a bright red coat clutched her purse to her chest. A volunteer in a Santa hat took an involuntary step backward. "Sir, you cannot bring those in here," the guard started, his voice pitching high. He did not come any closer. The first of the uniformed figures looked at him, eyes unreadable under the brim of his knit cap. "We are not here to argue," the man said. "Where is your ER?" The guard pointed with 2 fingers, his hand shaking. "Down the hall," he said. "Through those doors." The soldiers moved as one, a practiced flow that split and formed again as they passed furniture and people. Kane was with them now, his dark coat unbuttoned, the outline of his sidearm visible at his hip. He murmured something into a radio, listening to the answer through an earpiece. In the ER, the double doors to the lobby burst open. The first soldier threw scanned left, then right weapon, low but sure. The second moved past him, eyes tracking the corners of the room. Behind them, more filed in, filling the space with an energy that felt like static before a storm. The shock rippled through the staff. Jake stepped back until his calves hit the counter. "Okay," he said, voice thin. "This is above my pay grade." Marlene squared her shoulders. "This is a hospital," she said, stepping toward the nearest soldier. "You do not point weapons near my patients." "They are not pointed at your patients," the soldier said. His tone was flat. "They are pointed at the floor." "Point them at the concrete outside," she answered. He did not argue. He did not agree either. He just held his position. Patients watched with wide eyes. An elderly man clutched the arms of his chair. A teenager pulled out his phone thumb, hovering over the camera app before his mother slapped his hand down. Lena stood near the supply cabinet, the mop still in her hand. Her pulse had climbed without her noticing. She could feel it in the base of her throat and her ears. Kane stepped in behind the first wave. His hair was dusted with melted snow, now damp strands dark against his forehead. He scanned the ER again, slower this time, his gaze hooking on faces for a heartbeat each. When his eyes passed over Lena, he did not look away immediately. She turned her head as if checking on a monitor behind her, letting her hair fall forward to obscure part of her profile. The mop handle felt slick under her fingers. Then the man behind Kane entered the room, and every conversation that had not already died fell silent. He was not taller than the others. His shoulders did not seem broader. Yet something about the way he carried himself shifted the axis of the space. His hair was cut short, more from habit than from regulation. Deep lines bracketed his mouth. There was a faint scar high on one cheek. the kind that might have been from shrapnel or a childhood fall, and nothing in his manner suggested the second. He wore a dark coat that looked civilian enough, but the collar did not sit quite right. Lena recognized the way it hung over plated fabric. His eyes moved over the room, taking in people, equipment, exits. He did not look at the weapons his team carried. He did not need to. Major General Daniel Rourke stepped past the soldiers and into the center of the ER as if he had walked into a briefing room he owned. Marlene found her voice first. "Who are you?" she demanded. "What is this?" Rourke's gaze flicked to her, noted her stance, the badge on her chest, then moved on. "I'm looking for a nurse," he said. "Lena Hart." The room seemed to breathe in as one. Jake glanced at Lena. His eyes went round. Marlene turned her head toward her before she could stop herself. Lena felt dozens of eyes land on her. She let go of the mop. It tipped the handle, falling to the floor with a hollow clack, the wet head slumping against the tile. Her hand felt empty without it. Rourke's gaze followed the sound, then the angle of movement. Their eyes met across the space between supply cabinets and rolling carts and clustered chairs. In that instant, the background noise of the ER faded. The beeping monitors, the hiss of oxygen, the soft murmur of patients. All of it dropped away into a kind of muffled hum. He started walking toward her. He did not hurry. Every step was measured, boots quiet on the floor. The soldiers parted slightly to let him pass their formation, adjusting without conscious thought. Lena stood still. She thought of turning and walking out the back hall, of slipping into the supply room and closing the door. She knew exactly how many steps it would take. She had done that math the moment the rotors hit the roof. Her feet did not move. She watched him approach, watched the lines of his face sharpen with each pace, the set of his mouth, the way his eyes did not waver. He stopped in front of her, close enough that she could see the flecks of gray in his hair, at the temples. Up close, the years on his face were more pronounced. So were the things behind his eyes. For a second, neither of them spoke. Then he did something no one in the room expected. He straightened every inch of him, aligning heels together, shoulders back. His right hand rose in a crisp, flawless salute, fingers just touching his temple. "Ma'am," he said. His voice filled the space without needing to be loud. "Seraph 3. A murmur went through the room like wind through dry grass. Jake's jaw dropped. Marlene's eyes flicked from Rourke's raised hand to Lena's face. Even the soldiers, disciplined and silent, shifted their weight almost imperceptibly. Lena felt the floor under her feet as if it had suddenly become more real, more solid. It had been a long time since anyone had called her that. Longer still since anyone had joined it with the respect of a salute. Her throat tightened. "Do not," she said quietly. "Not here." Rourke held the salute for a breath longer, then lowered his hand. The movement was deliberate, not casual. He broke the pose, but not the intent. "I have been looking for you for 5 years," he said. His words were simple. The weight behind them was not. Lena's eyes flicked to the side. Marlene, Jake, the patients all stared. Kane watched from a short distance away, his expression a mask that did not quite hide his relief. She looked back at Rourke. "I am not in uniform anymore," she said. "You know that." "You were declared missing, presumed killed," he answered. "Someone else put that on paper. It does not make it true." Her jaw shifted a small clench that relaxed before it turned to anything more. "This is a hospital," she said. "You are disrupting my shift." Reyes emerged from a nearby room, having finally been drawn out by the change in air pressure in the ER. He took in the soldiers, the general, the posture of his nurses, and looked thoroughly out of his depth. "What is going on?" he asked. "Is this some kind of drill?" Rourke did not look at him. He turned his head slightly, addressing the room without taking his attention entirely away from Lena. "This is not a raid," he said. "There is no active shooter, no chemical spill, no bomb threat. No one in this building is under arrest." The tension shifted, not gone, but less jagged. He glanced back at Lena. "We are here for her," he said. "Nothing else." A thin, strangled sound slipped from someone near the waiting area. The elderly man who had called them angels earlier stared with his mouth slightly open. Jake whispered almost reverently, "What did he call you?" Lena heard him. She did not answer. Her shoulders settled almost imperceptibly, as if she had set down a weight she had been carrying in that exact position for too long. "I am not her anymore," she said. "Seraph 3 is dead. You made sure of that." There was no accusation in her tone, only fact. Rourke took the words, absorbed them. "I signed the papers," he said. "I know what we wrote. We can talk about that." His gaze softened by a degree, not enough for anyone else to notice, but enough that she did. "But not out here," he added. "Not in front of your patients." He took half a step back, giving her space. "For now," he said, "they deserve to know that the person you have been treating as disposable is not." The phrase landed like a dropped tray. Marlene flinched. Jake looked down. A flush rose along his neck. Rourke turned to face the staff, fully voice, carrying without effort. "Do you know who this is?" he asked, looking from face to face, then back at Lena. "Who she really is?" Lena closed her eyes for a heartbeat, then opened them again. She stood alone in the center of the ER under bright fluorescent light with snow hurling itself against the glass and rotors cooling on the roof. The past, which she had kept folded in a battered tin and hidden in a locker, had walked in and said her name. No one answered Rourke's question. The silence had a weight. It stretched from the nurse's station to the waiting room, settled over the beds and monitors and chairs. Somewhere a blood pressure cuff finished deflating with a soft hiss and then went quiet. Rourke let the quiet sit for a moment, as if he expected someone to speak. When no one did, he inclined his head slightly. "I will tell you," he said. His gaze did not leave Lena, but his words were for everyone. 5 years ago, he began, there was an operation in a desert you will not find on any news map, a medevac gone sideways. Intel that was wrong, pilots who never made it back to their base. Jake swallowed. His tongue darted out to lick lips that had gone suddenly dry. "We went in to pull out a team under fire," Rourke continued. "We ended up in a bowl. High ground all around hostile positions, shooting down at us rotor wash, kicking sand into every cut and burn. The birds took hits. One of them got torn open before it was even fully on the ground. For a second, his eyes unfocused, like he was not seeing the ER anymore, but something overlaid on top of it. The reflection of bright light on sand. A helicopter tipped on its side blades, torn and half buried. Lena stood very still. "It was supposed to be a clean extraction," he said. "In and out, 20 minutes on the ground. Instead, we were there for hours. Communications went to hell, support got scrambled. The only thing that did what it was supposed to do was the personnel on the ground." He nodded once, small but sure. "Specifically, the medic team." He let that hang, then looked fully at Lena. Specifically her. A soft intake of breath came from the waiting area. The older man with the Cubs jacket had a hand pressed to his chest like he was trying to feel his own heartbeat. Marlene folded her arms, fingers digging into her sleeves. "What did she do?" she asked. Her voice had lost its sharpness. It sounded like someone trying to fit a new word into their mouth. Rourke shifted his weight, one hand sliding into the pocket of his coat. The gesture almost made him look casual. The lines around his eyes said otherwise. "She took a situation that was designed to kill us and refused to let it do its job," he said. "The pilots were down. The team on the ground was bleeding out. I had a hole in my leg that should have emptied me onto the sand in under 2 minutes." His hand came back out of his pocket, and he rubbed his thigh, absently fingers pressing along where an old scar must lie under the fabric. "She cut strips from a dead man's uniform, broke 2 needles, getting a catheter into a vein, and pinned my femoral artery closed, while mortar rounds walked toward us in the dark." Jake's eyes went wide. "You are saying she saved your life," he blurted. Rourke nodded once. "Not just mine," he said. 19 of us, 19 who walked or were carried onto a bird that was not supposed to come. 19 who were breathing when we cleared the horizon because she refused to board until she had every single one of us on the manifest." He looked at Lena again. This time the softness in his gaze was clearer, the kind of respect that did not need rank. "Seraph 3, he said quietly, almost to himself. "Field lead medic, Med Echo 7. Nina, who had drifted back closer to the station as the soldiers poured in, let out a small strangled half-laugh. "You are kidding," she said. "This is some kind of story, right? Like a recruitment video." The words sounded wrong, even as they left her mouth. Thin, out of place. Rourke turned his head toward her. "Do I look like I am recruiting?" he asked. His tone was not angry. It did not have to be. There was something in the way he held himself that made the question land like a reprimand. Nina's mouth closed. Color rose along her neck. Lena spoke before anyone else could. "Enough," she said. It was not directed at Nina alone. It was a general statement. Her voice was steady. The anger that might have been there had spent itself long ago on different targets. "You came all this way to tell war stories," she added, looking back at Rourke. "Why?" He studied her face for a moment, as if checking how much he could lay on it without making it crack. "We came because we have another problem," he said. "A different kind." He reached into the inside pocket of his coat and took out a slim folder. It was not thick. That made it worse. Thick folders were full of too much information. Thin ones were full of the parts no one knew what to do with. He opened it, glanced at a page, then closed it again. The act seemed more like grounding than reading. "There's a new unit," he said. "Mixed branches, high altitude, long duration insertions. It took years to build them, millions of dollars in training, the best medics we have." He lifted the folder slightly. "They are breaking," he said. "Physically?" Reyes asked from where he stood at the edge of the circle stethoscope, still around his neck. "Injuries." "Some," Rourke said. "Mostly not from hostile contact. Mostly from the inside. They are making it through the missions, then unraveling in the debrief rooms. Panic attacks, blackouts, dissociation. Some cannot get through a week without snapping at ghosts." He tapped the folder with his thumb. "They are following a protocol we designed to keep them safe," he went on. We thought if we staggered their exposure, staggered their decompression, we could manage the load. CTC, Lena said quietly. It was the first time she had given the thing a name. Rourke nodded. Cognitive triage cascade, he confirmed. Your original manual was the base. Someone upstairs decided to improve it. And you let them, she said. I was in command of other things, he replied. I read the summaries. They look solid. On paper. He flipped the folder open again, held up a sheet with a chart on it. Lines and boxes, arrows pointing to phases. In practice, we are seeing a pattern, he said. A delay built into the system. A waiting period before certain supports kick in. Looks good in theory. In reality, we are asking them to hold their breath for too long. Reyes frowned. Why does that mean you need her? He asked. You have psychiatrists. You have whole departments for this. We have people who design systems, Rourke said. Very smart people who have never had their hands inside someone else's chest without a proper tray. We have people who read the numbers and move the boxes on the chart. He looked at Lena. What we do not have anymore, he said, is the one person who wrote the original protocols after seeing what happens when they go wrong. The person who understands that a line on a flowchart is a human being standing in a hallway at 4 a.m, deciding whether to take one more step. He let the folder fall closed again. You wrote the first draft of CTC, he said. They built on it. They turned a field guide into a manual. You know where the cracks are. You saw them before the explosion. Lena's hand shifted at her side, fingers flexing once. That was a long time ago, she said. You have new people now. Rourke shook his head. We have people who have never watched a medic throw up behind a Humvee because he realized the patient on the stretcher is the same kid he patched up a week ago, he said. We have people who think resilience is a number you can move with a new questionnaire. He took a small step closer, lowering his voice a notch. Enough that the words were meant for her first, everyone else second. You have seen the other side, he said. You have seen what happens when the system fails. You survived it. She drew in a breath that made her shoulders rise. And what is it you want from me? She asked. Exactly. Rourke did not hesitate. I want you to come in and watch them work, he said. Sit in on their briefings, read their reports, tear apart the CTC revisions, and tell me where we are setting them up to fall. I want you to tell us how to stop breaking our own medics. He held her gaze. I am not asking you to pick up a rifle, he said. I am not asking you to stand under rotors in a desert again. The floor seemed to tilt under her feet anyway, just for a second, as if some part of her inner ear still lived on a landing zone. I am tired of being useful to you only when there is blood on the ground, she said. I know, he said. There was no defense in his tone, no justification, just the acknowledgement of a fact. You came with soldiers, she said. With guns. I came with the only language the people above me listened to, he answered. Force and urgency. If I had written an email, it would have sat in a queue until the next fiscal year. Marlene let out a breath she had been holding for so long, it came out as almost a laugh. That is the most honest thing I have heard all night, she muttered. Lena looked past Rourke, then at the faces around her. Jake eyes wide guilt and awe fighting on his features. Nina jaw clenched fingers twisted in the hem of her scrub top. Reyes thoughtful and uneasy. The patients sitting in their chairs, rubber bracelets around their wrists, watching a conversation that felt too big for the room they were in. Her gaze snagged on Nina's just for a second. Nina's lips parted. I did not know, she said. The words were barely above a whisper. I swear I did not know. You did not have to, Lena replied. There was no heat in it. That somehow made it worse. She looked back at Rourke. If I go with you, she said slowly, I will not design anything that makes it easier to send them into more fire. Fair, he said. I will not sign off on protocols that trade one kind of damage for another, she added. I will not help you break them in a new way. I am not asking you to, he said. I will not stay, she said. Aisatsi, I am not coming back to that world. I live here now. Her eyes flicked to the chart rack, the monitors, the patients. This is where I work, she said. These are my people. Rourke nodded. You come in as a consultant, he said. 48 hours, maybe 72. You speak your mind. You tell us where the fault lines lie. Then you walk away and come back to your hospital. His mouth twitched almost a smile, but not quite. I will have to fight some people to make that happen, he said. I brought enough stripes to win that fight. The building hummed around them. Somewhere above the helicopter's engines began to spool down rotors, slowing into a lower, heavier chop. Behind Reyes, one of the monitors beeped a warning. The young nurse Jake turned, automatically checking the screen. His face went pale for a moment. Lena's attention snapped to him. What is it? She asked. He swallowed. Patient in Bay 4, he said. Post-op. Pressure dropped when they heard the rotors. They are sweaty and gray. I think they are about to faint. Not just faint, Lena said. She was already moving. She slipped past Rourke, past the soldiers, and into Bay 4 in 3 strides. A middle-aged man sat half upright in the bed of in his arm. Eyes closed, lips moving soundlessly, his hands gripped the sheets, knuckles white. "Mr. Lawson," she said, voice even. "Open your eyes for me." He did, blinking fast. "I am fine," he said. His chest was heaving. "Just hate flying." "You are not flying," she said. "You are in Chicago. Your body thinks you are somewhere else for a moment. We are going to remind it where you are." She tilted the bed back, elevated his legs, and signaled Jake without looking. "Open the fluids," she said. "Wide just for a minute. Get a cuff on his other arm." Jake snapped into motion. The man's breathing slowed with the change in position. Color crept back from the edges of his lips. Lena watched his pupils, the rise and fall of his chest, the number on the monitor, as it climbed from low to something closer to safe. "See," she said softly. "Not flying at all." She stayed until his hands unclenched and his grip on the sheets loosened. Then she straightened, nodded to Jake, and stepped back into the main ER. The soldiers had not moved much. Rourke stood where she had left him. The staff watched her as if she had performed a trick instead of routine care. Rourke's eyes met hers. "That," he said, "is what we are losing. People who see it before it drops." She exhaled once through her nose. "Of course you would follow a panic case into my ER, she said. "You always did love timing." A tiny smile touched his mouth, gone almost before it formed. "I need an answer," he said. She looked at the doors to the lobby. Beyond them, the glow of the streetlights bounced off the curve of the black vehicles. The air that leaked in around the edges of the glass was bitter and sharp. Her gaze drifted up toward the ceiling, toward the roof where the helicopter sat. The rotors were spinning slower now, each turn a heavy, measured sound. Her heart beat in time with it for 3 counts, then found its own rhythm again. She dropped her eyes back to him. "I will go," she said. The words landed with a subtle click like a key turning. "But I am going to say it again so there is no confusion," she added. "I am going to save lives. I am not going to be part of taking them." Rourke inclined his head. "Understood," he said. "Ma'am." He turned to Kane. "Clear a path to the service elevator," he said. "Notify the pilot. We will be wheels up in 15. Kane spoke into his radio. The soldiers shifted, forming a corridor through the center of the ER. It was not a hostile formation, but it was solid. They held the space like a frame. Lena walked to the nurse's station. She took off her badge and set it on the counter for a moment, then picked it up again and clipped it back to her top. Marlene watched her with eyes that now held something like apology. "You will be on the schedule tomorrow," Marlene said. "Same shift." "I know," Lena said. Reyes cleared his throat. "If this is all true," he said, then stopped searching for the next word. "It is," she replied. He nodded as if that settled something in his own head, if not in the air. Jake fumbled with something behind the desk, then held out a paper cup. "I made you coffee," he said. "It is terrible, but it is hot." She took it, felt the warmth seep into her fingers, and then set it down beside the tin of cookies she had left earlier. The red string on the lid had come loose and trailed across the counter. "Keep an eye on Mr. Lawson," she said. "He flinches when he hears anything loud. Tell him it is just the snowplows." Jake nodded quickly. Nina stood by the supply cabinet, arms wrapped around herself. "Lena," she said. Lena looked at her. "I am sorry," Nina said. The words were clumsy, too small for the space they needed to fill. "I know," Lena said. It was neither forgiveness nor rejection. It was acknowledgement. She turned to follow Rourke. As she walked through the line of soldiers, they straightened but did not salute. This was not the place. Their respect showed in smaller ways. In the way they shifted to give her space without crowding. In the way their eyes tracked her with sharp, clear recognition. The doors to the back corridor opened with a soft hiss. The hall beyond was narrower, the walls closer. The fluorescent lights buzzed overhead, painting the concrete in pale bands. Rourke walked at her side. Kane fell in a step behind them. The sound of their boots on the floor echoed a steady rhythm. At the elevator, Rourke pressed the button. The door slid open, revealing a metal interior that smelled faintly of oil and cleaning solution. Lena stepped in. As the doors began to close, the muffled sound of the ER faded. The last thing she saw through the narrowing gap was the nurse's station with its scattered charts and coffee cups, the waiting room with its tired faces, the red string on the cookie tin. The elevator started to rise. Above them on the roof, the rotors began to pick up speed again. The elevator rose, humming softly, and then it was gone, swallowed by the floors above. In the ER, the sound of the rotors shifted again, climbing from a heavy thrum back toward a higher pitch. The building vibrated, a low shudder that ran up through the chair legs and the metal frames of the beds. Jake moved to the nearest window, hand braced on the sill, trying to see through the frost. He scraped a small circle in the condensation with his knuckles. Outside, through the smeared glass and blowing snow, he caught a glimpse of dark mass and spinning blades, lights winking red and white against the night. The helicopter lifted slow at first, then with more confidence. Snow billowed around it, kicked up by the wash, turning the rooftop into a storm within a storm. For a second, the machine hovered above the hospital, a hulking shape, against the glow of the city. Then it rose higher and slid sideways into the white. The sound followed it, fading from a pounding drum to a distant murmur, and finally into nothing. Silence poured in behind it. Not true silence. The machine still beeped, air flowed through vents. Somewhere someone coughed, but all of those sounds felt small now, like background noise under something that had just ended. The soldiers in the ER shifted, listening to updates in their earpieces, then began to peel away in small groups. Some headed back toward the lobby boots, squeaking on the damp tile. Others stayed behind, posted at doors and intersections like shadows that had chosen corners. Rourke and Kane had gone up with Lena. Without them, the room felt less anchored and more surreal, as if what had just happened might have been a collective hallucination. Marlene was the first to move. "Okay," she said. Her voice came out rough, like she had been yelling, though she had not. "We still have patients. We still have an ER. No one bleed on my floor just because you are staring at the ceiling." Her words broke the spell a little. The younger nurse stationed at the monitors snapped to attention, checking vitals, typing notes. A respiratory therapist adjusted a nasal cannula. Somewhere a printer spat out lab results. Reyes stood near the doorway to Bay 4 stethoscope, hanging forgotten around his neck. He looked toward the nurse's station, toward the small space where Lena usually stood when she was not in a room. The spot was empty. The mop leaned against the wall, at an odd-angle handle, still on the floor where she had let it fall. "I told that paramedic I caught the occipital bleed," he said suddenly. Marlene glanced at him. "What?" she asked. "Earlier," he said. "The lakeshore rollover. I told him I caught it." He flexed his fingers, staring at his own hands. "I did not. She did." Marlene set a chart down. "Yeah," Jake said quietly. "We saw." The confession hung there for a moment. Reyes huffed out a breath that was almost a laugh, and almost not. "I thought I was the calm one," he said. "The cool head in a crisis. Turns out it was the woman we send home on the bus because nobody offers her a ride." He looked up, eyes landing on Nina. "You mocked her cookies," he said. The remark was not cruel. It was flat factual. Nina flinched like he had thrown something. "I know," she said. Her voice had lost its usual bounce. "You do not have to make a list. I remember." She leaned back against the station, the edge of the counter, pressing into her lower back. Her arms folded tight over her chest, fingers gripping her own elbows as if she needed something to hold on to. "I called her cheap," she said, in front of everybody. Told her this place was the only one that would have her. The words sounded uglier spoken aloud, now replayed against the backdrop of what they had learned. Jake sank into a rolling chair, then got up again immediately as if sitting felt wrong. "We all did it," he said. "Not just you." "We let you say it." Marlene rubbed her forehead. "There is no glory in taking turns with the guilt," she said. "Spread it out. It fits on everybody." Near the far wall, the older man in the Cubs jacket cleared his throat. "Excuse me," he said, raising a tentative hand. "Is that nurse coming back?" Marlene hesitated. "She will," she said finally. "Not tonight." The man nodded slowly. "She held my hand when they put the IV in," he said. "Did not have to. I have had more pokes than a pincushion. But she did." He shifted in his chair, wincing a little. "Seems wrong for a person like that to leave without anybody saying thank you," he added. His words landed gently but firmly. Marlene swallowed. "Yeah," she said. "It does." She picked up the clipboard that held the shift assignments, stared at the names for a moment, as if seeing them for the first time, then set it back down. "All right," she said. "No more calling patients frequent flyers, or train wrecks, or whatever other garbage we have been using because we are tired. That is not official policy," the younger nurse said weakly. "It is now," Marlene answered. "My policy? Tell whoever you want I said it." Jake nodded, eyes dropping to the floor, then lifting again. "And no more charity case, Dasa," he said. "We say patient, or client, or Mr. and Ms. like we were raised in houses and not barns." His attempt at a joke fell flat, but on the right side of the line. Nina stared at the whiteboard near the station where someone had drawn a snowman in dry erase marker. Next to it, a list of petty notes had been scribbled over the days. Clean microwave after use. No personal calls on the main line. Label your food. She snagged a marker from the tray and stepped up to the board. The squeak of the tip on the surface was loud in the quiet. "What are you doing?" Jake asked. "Something," she said. She wiped away the snowman with the side of her hand, leaving a smear of blue and red. In its place in blocky letters, she wrote, "Dignity Pledge." Underneath, she added, "No more slurs for patients. No more jokes about poverty. We treat everyone like they matter." Her handwriting was a little crooked, the lines not perfectly straight. She capped the marker and stepped back. "It's corny," she said. "I do not care." Marlene looked at the board for a long moment. then pulled the marker from its tray. She added one more line. "We do not assume we know anyone's story." "There," she said. "Now it is official." Jake studied the words, then nodded slowly. "Guess it beats the microwave rules," he said. From the waiting room, the hum of low conversation grew again, cautious at first, then broader. Someone turned the television volume up a notch. The anchors had moved on from convoys to feel-good holiday pieces taped earlier in the week. A clip of a school choir singing to nursing home residents filled the screen, the sound tinny and distant. Reyes leaned his elbows on the counter, looking tired in a way that had nothing to do with the hour. "If she was declared dead for saving you," he said to no one in particular, "then written off again in this place for working nights, what does that make us?" Marlene glanced at him. "Human," she said. "Messy, wrong, a lot." He let out a breath. "We can try to be less wrong," he said. "Good start," she replied. The security guard from the front desk drifted back into the ER scarf now properly wrapped around his neck. He avoided looking at the soldiers as much as possible. "Helicopter is clear of the pad," he reported. "Roof says they lifted north, pretty quick." "Of course they did," Marlene said. "They blew in, turned the world upside down, and took off again." The guard rubbed the back of his neck. "That colonel guy," he said. "The one with the picture earlier. He tried to ask me about her before. I blew him off." Marlene raised an eyebrow. "Why?" she asked. He shrugged, embarrassed. "Looked like any other guy," he said. "Said he was looking for a nurse. I figured if she mattered, he would already know where she was." His own words seemed to sour in his mouth as he repeated them. Jake made a small, sharp sound, almost a laugh. "Apparently she mattered," he said. The guard nodded, jaw working. "Yeah," he said. "Apparently." He turned toward the nurse's station, eyes landing on the tin of cookies. Sitting there, red string loose on the lid. "You mind if I take one of those?" he asked. Marlene shrugged. "They are hers," she said, but I think she would not object. He opened the tin, chose a cookie, and bit into it. The edges were a little crisp. The center was softer than it looked. Cinnamon and oats and something else he could not place. "Good?" he said, sounding surprised. "Yeah," Jake said. "They always were." Near the chairs, the man in the Cubs jacket pulled a folded piece of paper and a pen from his pocket. He wrote something quickly, his hand moving with the economy of age. When he finished, he stood and walked stiffly to the nurse's station. He set the note beside the cookie tin. "For her," he said. Marlene glanced down. In shaky block letters, it read, "Thank you for holding my hand when no one else did." She swallowed. "I will make sure she sees it," she said. After a while, the soldiers in the ER began to withdraw completely. Their boots faded down the hall. The black vehicles outside pulled away, engines low and steady, taillights smearing red against the snow. The last echo of the helicopter had already gone. The ER returned to its usual size, but something in the way people stood in it had altered. They walked a little softer past the empty space at the station where Lena usually leaned between calls. They lowered their voices without quite knowing why. Outside, the storm pressed on, thick and relentless. Inside, under harsh lights and a buzzing ceiling, a shift had started, quiet and hard to name, but real. Morning came and went, then another. The days after Lena left folded into each other, edged with snow and the hum of fluorescent light. The storm eased, then returned in smaller waves. Streets cleared, then whitened again. The hospital settled back into its routines, but the rhythm felt slightly altered, like a song played in a different key. People caught themselves before certain words reached their mouths. A text started to say frequent flyer stopped and changed it to regular. Jake almost joked about a charity case, bit his tongue, and said patient instead. Each correction was small, but they stacked up. Lena's chair at the station stayed empty. Her mug sat where she had left it, a ring of dried coffee, in the bottom. The cookie tin remained near the computer, the red string curling lazily over the lid. More notes joined the first one beside it. Crumpled receipts, the back of a prescription pad, scraps torn from envelopes, all in different handwriting. "Thank you for staying when my husband came in. You were the only one who looked at me, not my chart. You listened." On the third morning after the overnight shift, Nina stood in front of the locker room door and did not go in for a full minute. The hallway was quiet. Somewhere far off, a floor cleaner whined. The air smelled faintly of antiseptic and burnt coffee. She took a breath and pushed the door open. Metal lockers lined the walls, a familiar forest of doors and combination locks. The bench in the middle of the room held a couple of abandoned tote bags and a pair of shoes with hospital socks stuffed inside. Nina walked down the row until she reached Lena's locker. She had never paid much attention to which one was hers before. Now she knew exactly where it was, could have found it in the dark. A piece of tape on the door had the name Heart written on it in block letters that were starting to fade. Marlene stepped in behind her glasses, hanging on a chain around her neck. Jake came in last, carrying an old duffel bag he had found in the supply closet. "You sure about this?" he asked. "No," Nina said, "but I'm going to do it anyway." Marlene nodded once, a small grant of authority. "Open it," she said. Nina turned the dial hand steady. She had watched Lena do it enough times that the numbers came back to her without effort. The lock clicked. The door swung open with a reluctant metal creak. Inside the thin navy coat hung from its hook shoulders, slightly misshapen. Next to it was a worn hoodie folded over itself, the fabric thinned at the elbows. On the shelf above sat a pair of sneakers, soles worn smooth, and a plastic lunch container with a faint ring of tomato sauce at the bottom. No battered tin, no half ID, those had gone with Lena. The sight of the coat hit Nina harder than she expected. It was such an ordinary thing, a coat that had been shrugged on and off 100 times, sleeves pushed up past wrists, pockets stuffed with pens and glucose packets. She reached out and touched the fabric. It was rougher than it looked. "I used to laugh at this," she said quietly, "at how old it was." Marlene watched her hand smooth the sleeve. "It kept her warm," Marlene said. "Or tried to." Jake stepped closer. "So how do we do this?" he asked. "We just take it." "We are not stealing," Nina said. "We are borrowing. For us. For her." She lifted the coat carefully from the hook. The hanger rattled softly against the metal rod. The coat was lighter than she expected, like there was less between her and the air when she held it. They carried it down a side hallway few patients used anymore. Old framed posters still hung on the walls, lists of outdated policies, and faded pictures of hand-washing techniques. At the end of the hall stood a glass display case that had been empty for as long as anyone could remember. It had once held awards and plaques that had been moved to a newer case in the lobby. Dust filmed the inside of the glass, faint in the morning light. Jake unlocked it with a key from maintenance, the door swinging open on stiff hinges. The smell of old air puffed out dry and unused. Nina placed the coat inside. For a moment she fussed with it, trying to decide how it should hang. She settled on draping it over a simple hanger hooked to the bar at the top of the case. The sleeves fell naturally, the hem brushing the bottom. It looked like it was waiting for someone to reach in and shrug into it. Marlene slid a small card into the holder at the front, the kind usually used for labeling displays. She had written on it in her careful, neat script, "Uniform of Humility." Below that in smaller letters, "In honor of Nurse Lena Hart, for service seen and unseen." They stood back. "It feels strange," Jake said. "Putting a coat in a box." "It felt stranger watching her walk out with a general and not doing anything," Marlene replied. "This is something." A respiratory therapist walked by, slowed, and stopped. "What is that?" he asked. Nina cleared her throat. "A reminder," she said. The therapist leaned closer, reading the card. His face shifted. He nodded, then continued down the hall, a little quieter than before. Word spread. By the end of the shift, more staff had found their way to the old hallway. Some came alone. Some came in pairs, talking in low voices. They read the card, looked at the coat, and stood in silence for a few seconds. No one touched the glass. Back in the ER, the board with the new pledge filled with signatures. Different colored markers, different flourishes. Someone added a crooked heart next to the last line. No one erased it. Outside, the snow piles along the curb had begun to melt in places, gray slush at the edges. The sky showed a thin band of pale blue between clouds. The city exhaled. 3 days passed. On the 4th evening, just after sunset, Lena's old mug on the station counter had been washed and filled with fresh coffee. Someone had placed it on a napkin to catch the drips. A small white flower in a recycled medication vial stood beside it, the stem trimmed short. Jake was at the monitors. Marlene was talking to a resident about a consult. Nina was rebandaging a child's scraped knee. The floor under their feet trembled. Not sharply, just enough to make the pens in the cup on the counter rattle. The distant chop of rotors followed a breath later. It was not as sudden as the first time. The sound approached steadily, a low pulse building over the noise of the city, then cresting as it came near the hospital. Jake looked up from the monitor's, eyes going to the ceiling. "You hear that?" he said. Marlene did not answer. She did not need to. Her hand had gone still on the chart. Out in the waiting room, a teenager at the window pressed his face to the glass. "Helicopter," he said. "Big one. Landing on the roof." The security guard's radio crackled at his hip. "Roof to security," a voice said. "We have a military bird requesting pad access. No ground units yet. Please advise ER." He touched the button. "ER hears you," Marlene answered over his shoulder. "We are listening." The rotors wound down just above them, the vibration moving through concrete and bone. Patients shifted in their seats, some anxious, some curious. The monitor alarms stayed silent. No new crash carts rolled in. No black vehicles appeared at the front entrance this time. No line of armed soldiers marched down the hall. The doors at the main entrance slid open once in a while for ordinary reasons. A visitor came in dusting snow from her coat. A delivery person dropped off a stack of linens. In the side hallway, the coat in the glass case hung still, untouched by the shaking. The fluorescent light above it flickered once, then steadied. Nina stood in front of the case, having come there without quite thinking when the first tremor went through the floor. Her reflection floated over the glass, faint over the coat. She rested her fingertips lightly on the edge of the metal frame. "They are back," Jake said from the far end of the hall. His voice echoed off the tile. Nina looked toward him, then toward the ceiling. Her heart was beating faster than it should have been for someone who had not moved far. She took one slow breath, then another. "Then so is she," she said under her breath. She turned and walked toward the ER, the sound of the rotors humming in her ears like distant thunder. The elevator doors opened on the ER with a soft chime. Everyone was already in place. Word had gone around faster than any page. Nurses from other units lined the hallway in clean scrubs. Sneakers quiet on the tile. Techs stood shoulder to shoulder with residents and attendings. Even a few off-duty staff had drifted in coats still on hair damp from the snow. Heads turned as the doors slid back. General Rourke stepped out first. His coat was unbuttoned, the collar relaxed. The lines around his eyes were softer than they had been the night he arrived. He held the elevator door with one hand and turned slightly. Lena stepped out beside him. She wore the same hospital scrubs she had left in, though someone had given her a new jacket. It was thicker than her old coat, navy blue, with the hospital logo stitched over the pocket. It still looked a little stiff on her shoulders, not yet broken in. For a heartbeat, she seemed surprised by the sight in front of her. The hallway full of people. The way they stood a little straighter. The way their conversations had stopped, leaving only the distant hum of machines. Then the first head bowed. It was the older man from the waiting room, the Cubs fan. He was back-seated in a wheelchair, this time an outpatient band around his wrist. He dipped his head, once slow and deliberate. Others followed. Some bowed. Some just inclined their heads. No one had rehearsed it, but it spread down the hall like a small wave. Lena's hands tightened on the strap of the bag she carried. Her throat moved. "I am just a nurse," she said quietly. "Like you." Marlene stepped forward from the front of the group. "Maybe," she said, "but you are our nurse." It was not a title. It was a fact. Rourke smiled, the expression brief but real. "Med Tech Heart," he said, his voice pitched for the staff as much as for her. "The Joint Chiefs have requested you accept formal recognition as Med Tech Guardian for saving more lives than some entire units manage in a decade." He reached into his coat and pulled out a heavy envelope. It had a raised seal on the front, the edges crisp. He held it out to her. Lena looked at the envelope, then at his face. "You already gave me a title once," she said. "It did not end well." "This one does not require you to disappear," he replied, "or die on paper." The envelope stayed between them for a moment. She took it, thumb running along the edge. She did not open it. "I do not need a name in gold letters," she said. "I just want to be allowed to do my job." "You have done several," he said. "We are trying to catch up." He produced a second envelope, plain white, thicker. Her name was written across it in a simple hand. "This date," he said, "is back pay and pension. Retroactive to the date someone decided you belonged in a file cabinet instead of in your own life." She stared at it. "It is not about the money," she said. "I know," he answered. "But it is owed." Her hand shook once as she took the envelope. Only once. Marlene watched, jaw tight. "You fix your side," she said to Rourke. "We will try to fix ours." Rourke inclined his head. "We have started," he said. Her assessment of the revisions to CTC was blunt. A hint of dry amusement edged his tone. "Apparently asking medics to process the worst details after 48 hours without proper sleep is not optimal," he added. "Who knew?" "So you changed it," Reyes said. Rourke nodded. "We took the delay out," he said. "Moved the decompression up. Built-in mandatory breaks that cannot be overridden by someone with a clipboard and a tight schedule." He looked at Lena. "You were right," he said. "We were stretching them thin and calling it resilience." She did not look proud at the confirmation. She looked tired. "You listened this time," she said. "We did," he said, "and we will keep listening. That is the closest thing to an apology I can give you in this uniform." She accepted that with a small nod. He hesitated, then leaned in just enough that his words would not carry far. "There is one more thing," he said, "about how we found you." Her eyes narrowed slightly. "You already said you traced the paperwork." "Paperwork helped," he said. "So did stubbornness, but what lit you up on our radar was something else." He slipped a folded printout from his pocket, tapped it with 2 fingers. "Supply audits," he said. "One hospital in the state still ordering thermo-reactive trauma pads from a discontinued Med Echo 7 cache. Outdated, apparently, as far as everyone else was concerned." A corner of her mouth twitched. "They work," she said. "They cost less. They buy time." "I know," he said. "We designed them that way." He tucked the paper away. "It was your signature," he said. "You kept using them, kept patching people up the way you were taught. That is what gave you away." He smiled just a little. "Your kindness betrayed you," he said. "I will have to be more careful," she replied. "I hope you will not," he answered. He stepped back then, giving the space back to the staff. I am just her ride today, he said. You get her after this. He lifted a hand in a small salute toward the group, less formal than before, then turned and headed toward the lobby, Kane falling in beside him. Their boots faded down the hall. The crowd thinned, slowly drifting back toward work. Patients needed attention again. Phones rang. The ER began to move. Nina stayed. She approached the nurse's station like she was walking toward something delicate. On the counter, Lena's mug waited. Beside it, the cookie tin now surrounded by folded notes. The small white flower in the vial had opened a little more petals, spreading. Nina held a card in her hand. Plain blue on the front, blank inside. She set it down near the edge and slid it toward Lena. I did not know what to say on paper, she said, so I wrote the only thing that felt right. Lena flipped the card open. The handwriting inside was uneven, as if started and stopped several times. You are not poor. You are the richest heart in this hospital. I am sorry it took me this long to see it. Lena read it once, then again. Her eyes shone, but no tears fell. Thank you, she said. Nina shuffled her feet. I will probably still say stupid things, she said. I am trying not to, but I will. I know, Lena said. There was no edge in it, just acknowledgement of the truth. She set the card upright among the others where everyone at the station could see it. Jake hovered nearby, hands in his pockets. We kept the pledge, he said. Mostly. We are working on the microwave. Lena glanced at the board. The words were still there, a little smudged, a few more signatures added in different colors. I see, she said. She walked to her usual spot at the station and rested her hands on the edge of the counter. The wood was smooth under her palms, familiar. From here she could see the waiting room, the man in the Cubs jacket, a young mother rocking a baby, an older woman adjusting the blanket over her husband's legs. Ordinary scenes. On the far wall, a small television played footage of the city under snow. The sound was low, but the images were clear. Light reflected off drifts piled along sidewalks. A plow pushed slurry to the side of the road in a slow wave. Her gaze slid past it to the window. Outside, flakes still fell lighter now, each one catching the streetlight before it vanished against the glass. She reached for the cookie tin, untied the red string, and lifted the lid. The smell of oats and cinnamon rose faint, but present. She took a cookie, snapped it in half, and offered one piece to Nina. They are still warm, she said. Nina took it carefully as if it might break. Best I have ever had, she said. They ate in a brief, shared quiet, the crunch and chew of simple food grounding in the bright, buzzing space. Later, when Lena caught her reflection in the darkened window, she saw it layered. The curve of her jaw, the scrub top, the new jacket. And there, just visible where her hair did not quite fall right, the pale line of the scar at the base of her skull. Behind it in the glass, the faint outline of her own coat in the distant display case down the hall, the card that called it a uniform of humility. Past and present side by side. She stood a little straighter, not to match any old posture drilled into her body, but to fit the shape of the life she had chosen. In the ER, someone called her name. Nurse Hart. She turned toward the voice, toward the next patient, the next chart, the next small moment of work. Coming, she said. Her steps were steady as she walked back into the bright, restless heart of the hospital, where the lights hummed, the monitors beeped, and the snow fell outside against the glass. Thank you so much for listening to today's story. If this story resonated with you or made you reflect, I'd love to hear your thoughts. So feel free to share them in the comments below. And don't forget to like, subscribe, and hit the notification bell so you won't miss the next story.